Mom Who Knows Nada. My name is Brianna, and this is the Mama Knows Nada podcast. Today we have Elise with us. She is all about adolescent connections and finding ways to engage with your kids in meaningful and purposeful ways, especially the teen years. And she's going to chat all about some parenting tips and give some insight about how you can engage with your kids in a more effective manner. So Elise, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to have this conversation. I feel like we all need this insight, even as a mom of a toddler. So thank you again. So I have to ask, how have your own experiences led you to this profession?
I believe that me getting to this profession started when I was like 11. Of course, unbeknownst to me. I was a really happy, bubbly, like easygoing child, and then adolescence hit, and I became like, let me push every limit possible and be the one who's not like the other ones in my family, and yeah, so I think that's when it started. And I never ever I've had many like different careers or paths in my life, I guess you would say. And never was I like, oh, I want to work with adolescents. And yet multiple times in my life, I have wound up working with this age group.
You were destined for it.
So that's how I got here. Yes. And then the most recent like iteration of what I do, which is working with teens and moms of teens as a life and wellness coach, I was like, okay, I get it. Like, this is my calling. Here I am. Yes, I'm in for it. I think partly because of my colorful adolescence, I'm able to really connect with the adolescents themselves and help parents to see that, like, just because the stage that they're in right now is so challenging and they're pushing and they're doing all these things that feel so personal and scary and hard doesn't mean that that's like forever.
I think that's really interesting that you said that too, because sometimes I feel like it's hard for kids to really understand that their parents were that age once. So when you have a third party come in, especially if you have all kinds of different, maybe you made different lifestyle choices at 16 than you do, as an adult, right? Whether it's healthy eating habits, whether it's drugs, whether it's sex, like whatever it is, like it's hard to see your parents in that, like that silo, that vertical, And so for you to come be like, oh, well, actually, whatever your experiences are, I don't know, I wasn't there, but you can speak to them in a way and they're like, oh, like that connection, just to have someone like, oh, maybe adults might know a thing or two about a thing or two, is, I think, really impactful.
Yeah, like I think too, even if their parents are like, oh yeah, I did this, like I get you, they're like, no, you don't, like I can't hear that from you. But coming from a third party, the teen is more likely to listen. And then on the parenting side, me expressing what I went through as a teen and how like part of it is the development, they're like, okay, like that can open a little window too into their understanding. And also understanding that just because, like, I think a lot of us as parents who were wild and crazy, we're like looking for wild and crazy kids. So there's also this component of like, just because you did that doesn't mean they're going to do that. And you looking for that in them could cause some challenge.
Yes, absolutely. So why is it really important to kind of foster and really lay the groundwork for connections with teenagers specifically?
Yeah, it's so interesting because my children are 6 and 9, and I have a 24-year-old stepson. And so I did teenage years with him, and it was very challenging for many reasons. But I think with teens, like, as a parent of younger kids and toddlers, it takes so much physical energy. And as a parent of a teenager, the game is more mental. And it may not take as much of your like physical time, and sometimes that can equal to like, oh, I don't need to like be there as much. But I would argue like you may need to spend as much time like filling your own cup and taking care of your own self and like doing some self discovery so that you can really show up for them and be present for them and be non-reactive to them when they're coming and sharing they're possibly crazy or they're getting in trouble or whatever. Like, how do you want to show up to that situation? Do you want to show up with connection and understanding because you're regulated, or do you want to show up with like stress and anxiety because you're like, well, I'm like, my life is so full with these other things because you don't need as much of my time now.
No, that's a really good point. I never thought about that. And they do say that like toddler years and teen years, there's like a similar shift like hormonally. So I feel like what I'm doing now, like I have to like, make some mental notes or like write a notebook because this is what I'm going to be dealing with in like another 10 years because he's only 4 and my kid is like a teenager. I'm like, okay, so here we go. But I think the biggest difference is when they're older, you have more life experience. You are more independent. You are more capable of doing things at 14 than 4, and you're seeking that independence, right? So you're aren't you supposed to push the boundaries a little bit in adolescence? You know what I mean?
It is normal teenage behavior. It is part of like the shifts and the changes like hormonally and brain development wise that you must go through to become a functioning adult. And like with each one of the changes that's happening in an adolescent's brain, there's like the really positive side of it, and then there's the really challenging side of it. And so leaning into the positives, like I actually just wrote an email to my list about this today. Like teenagers and adolescents have this amazing, like innovative, creative, like that pushing of boundaries is also being able to like think of these big ideas and to be the change makers. And so like looking at both sides and understanding, okay, like this part of this is really hard, but how can I nurture this other part of it that is like amazing?
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. So let's talk a little bit about why it's really important to show up for your kids in a good headspace. Like as a parent, you have a little bit more physical time because your kids aren't so dependent on you. And utilizing that time for your own like mental well-being, like how does that really benefit that relationship and connection with your teen?
I mean, I think it's really important for all parents to acknowledge that their children are not them. They're not a direct reflection of them. And I think this becomes increasingly challenging as they grow older and start doing maybe pushing limits or even when they're doing really amazing things and like being like, that's totally them. Like they're totally doing this on their own. And it can be really isolating for parents of teens because they don't want to share like some of the struggles and the challenges that they're going through. Like when your kids are little, you're like talking about sleeping and like not eating their dinner and like those things that are totally comfortable to share amongst each other. But when your kid is a teen, like there's things that you might feel ashamed of. There's things that they don't want you to share with other people. And so I think it's important to find community, whether that's friends that you can really trust or whether it's a therapist or a coach, so that you can have these conversations when you have teens. And then that you're doing the self-reflection piece and seeing like, okay, when is my fear of what happened to me controlling my interactions with my child? When is my experience of, say, like a teenage boyfriend girlfriend breakup, whatever it may be, like when am I projecting that onto them versus just showing up and listening to them and whatever their experience is with their life right now, which is not mine.
I think it's a really good thing. I want to piggyback on that for a second. So when I was a kid, I wet the bed, right? So I'm very conscientious, and I know this isn't teen stuff, but it kind of is like a parallel to what you're saying. It's like I'm so nervous that my kid's gonna have the same problem that I like talk about it all the time. But that was my issue as a kid. That doesn't necessarily mean. So just to kind of like paint that full picture that you're saying, it's like, okay, just because this happened to me doesn't mean it's gonna be my son, right? Just because if someone was pregnant at 16 doesn't mean your daughter or your son's gonna, have a kid at 16. And I think it's so hard for parents, and if I catch myself doing it, I stop like living through my kid. Like I want him to be more capable and confident than I was, but I don't his dreams and his likes are his own. So I love that. And I think that's really important and hard for parents to separate themselves from, like especially because there are little organisms like we created that life, so we like take ownership, but it's not our life, right? So I love that.
I know. So similar, I mean, similar and different story. I really struggled with reading. And so, my daughter, my oldest daughter, like is a really good reader and loves reading. And it's been like really exciting for me just to be like, whoa, she's like just like taking a book and going off and reading and enjoying herself, because that was never my experience. And it made school really challenging for me, like all the way, because I didn't feel confident. Even when I was a good reader, I had a lack of confidence. And so, like, the other night, she just wanted to read her yearbook. And, like, it's summertime, it's chaos around here. They're not, like, reading 20 minutes every day and all the things. And I, like, went into this, my reaction to her choosing to look at her yearbook over reading her novel was very big. It was very inappropriate for the circumstance. I was like, ah! And then I had to self-reflect and be like, okay, like this is you. This is your, like, not wanting her to stop loving learning and school because that was your experience. And this has nothing to do with her. And I advocate for making repair and having that conversation with your kid once, like, I mean, I have this conversation with my 6 and 9 year old, like, hey, I really struggled with reading, and so I'm like, when seeing you love reading is amazing and exciting for me, and when I sensed that maybe you didn't, I totally overreacted and I'm sorry. And learning to do this when your kids are little is like so important so that you can also make repairs when they're teens, because you're going to need to keep on going with apologizing and making repairs, because we're all going to keep making mistakes.
That is another good point that I think you said, like going back through and making sure that you're growing along with them. Like you're taking ownership of your stuff and you're doing all the things that you can for the issues that you're having personally, without, and acknowledging where you're not right. Because let's be honest here, as parents, like we don't always get it right. So just having that awareness to do and be present and to have that self-reflection, I think sometimes like we have to remember as parents, like that's okay, that's totally okay. And I think sometimes we focus so much on being right, or the boss, if you will, that we don't allow ourselves to do that. I mean, this is me talking about it, so um I just love that you said that, because I do the same thing for my kid. Like if I yelled at him because he spilled something and I was like, I can't believe you did that, mommy overreacted, that wasn't appropriate. And I think we need to do that more sometimes, because we're humans and we're going to make mistakes.
Totally. And like what you're modeling for them that they can make a mistake and then make a repair too. So it's like it's doing two things. It's making your relationship stronger and it's showing them that like you're not perfect, you make mistakes, but when you do make mistakes, you apologize and you make it better. And it's almost like I think if there's a quote or a saying out there that repair is stronger than rupture. So like yes, maybe you yelled. Yes, maybe you overreacted, but once you repair, it makes the bond stronger than it was even before the rupture.
I love that. I didn't even think about that. Uh, that's a really good note. What do you think parents are misinterpreting, like misconceptions that we generally have as parents?
There's so many. I'm speechless. No. I think that like it's personal to us. Like teenagers are going through so many things mentally and like in their brain changing and socially and all of the things. And I think we take it personally because it feels really personal and it feels like their actions are directed towards us, but typically they're not. So that's like one thing to just keep in mind as a parent of a teen is like, and that connects back to really like filling your own cup. If you're feeling confident and strong in your parenting, when they are grumpy and not speaking to you, you're less likely to go to like, I did something, they're mad at me. So there's that. I think a lot of times teens get a really bad rap. And I attribute some of this to a lot of us experience teens in groups. And teens in groups can be very confronting because they're all learning how to be in social settings and it's so important for them to fit in. So they're doing things that they may not do one-on-one. And as a person who works with teens one-on-one, I'm like, they're pretty rad. Like they're amazing. They're thinking a lot deeper than, I actually think like teens have changed since I was a teen. Like I believe they're thinking about bigger things. Maybe it was just me that I wasn't, but like they're they're really amazing. Like the things that I see in them, the questions that they're asking, the things that they're thinking about in that one-on-one setting are really amazing. And so that's another thing that I like to just like put out there is like, and then I have worked in a school, so I have worked in classes of 30 teenagers and they can be really challenging and one-on-one they can be really awesome. So like keeping that in mind, the amount of challenges and social things that teens are navigating when they're in a group may be like tinting how you see them, but like connecting with them one-on-one can be, you get to really see like all of their strengths and qualities.
Ah, I think that's a really interesting point because every time I live in a beautiful neighborhood, right? And there's all these kids, teenagers in particular, popping around, and you're just like, ooh, sometimes it's a bit like, where are your parents at? Like, what are you doing? But you're just getting one version of them, not necessarily the full picture. So that's a really good thing to remember.
Yeah, I think the other piece is just that like learning about what teens, how their brains are changing, how this is a universal time that can be very challenging, can be really helpful in understanding why they may be doing things that are hurtful.
Talk a little bit about your programs. What do you offer? What services do you offer?
So I offer teen-centered coaching, and parent or mom-centered coaching. Typically, it's the moms. This, like, I kind of got to this place because I worked as a coach in a middle school and high school for a while. When I got into coaching, like I mentioned earlier, it was not to coach teens at all. And And then I found myself back in school working with teens. Um, and so, but the interesting thing about that was that like a teacher would reach out. Occasionally, a parent would like hear that there was a coach on campus and reach out, but typically it was a teacher. And they would come to me and say, you know, either they're struggling academically or socially or emotionally. Can you reach out to them? And oftentimes I was just working with that teen kind of in a bubble without the support of their family. And so in coaching, like if you want to make changes, not in coaching, in life, if you want to make changes, your environment is really important. And teens have less control over their environment than adults have. And so if the family wasn't on board, we could coach and we could do all the things, but if they were going home to an environment that wasn't supportive of the changes that they were trying to make, it was very challenging. And so I went back out on my own to work with teens and families as a whole because I felt like that was kind of the missing part from the schools. So my teen-centered coaching package definitely involves the mom or the dad if they so choose. So I typically have like a call with the parent, a call with the teen to see if we're a good fit, and then we start working together, the teen and I, and then at some point, if it's supportive to them, we bring the parent in for either a call with just me and the parent or a call with all three of us.
See, that's awesome. I like that you do like the both sides of it too, because you just never know. Like if I think sometimes as parents, we think we're doing everything right, but we're not. We also have room to grow. And I've said this before, but like I'm a firm believer in, yeah, you're here to teach your kids, but equally your kids are here to teach you. So there's always room for growth, personally, professionally, as a parent, and I love that you cover like the gamut. You can like help moms and dads or whoever their caregivers are really broach subjects. And what makes your approach to teenagers successful?
I think my ability to connect with them and to be kind of that third party that is not ever telling them what to do, but also kind of guiding them in a way that feels like just bringing up other perspectives or asking questions that make them be able to see things in a way that maybe they weren't able to see them before.
I like that because I think sometimes, what's that Turner phrase? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You know what I mean? Like you're giving them the opportunity to figure it out for themselves, but like putting like, little nuggets down the right. What's that children's story? Hansel and Gretel. There we go. It's like you know what I mean? You're like leading them. Oh,
When I coach parents and when I coach moms mostly and when I coach teens, like it's a very different session. And I love both of them and they're very like different and unique and the as a coach of a teen, like being okay and understanding that that we have these great conversations and knowing that they are taking the nuggets and the things that they need out of that and taking them out into their lives, but also like never hearing about them. Like I will hear from their parents when I have a call with their parents or a check-in and they're like, oh my gosh, she did this and this, and like, oh my gosh, these changes have occurred, but the teen isn't like saying any of that to me. Whereas when I coach adults, they're like, oh my gosh, I went and did this and this thing was super helpful and that was helpful and this didn't work and that didn't work. And so you have a little bit more of that follow through, interaction, all of the things. And with teens, sometimes it can feel like there's less connection almost, but I always hear usually from the mom that like these changes are happening. So it's a like sometimes it can feel like are we getting somewhere? Where with moms, I always feel like I know where I am, and with teens, sometimes I'm like, I don't know, but like I believe that having that connection on the call and being like present with them is kind of, and planting little seeds. I like to think of all my work that I do with teens as like planting seeds, and then some of them are going to grow and some of them aren't, and being okay with that.
Well, yeah, because it's kind of like, not everybody can be Buddha, right? So, if you're teaching these wisdoms, like sometimes they don't really click until years later, but at least it's in there somewhere. That's what I would like from my own experience. I could see where like my parents saying stuff. And also sometimes my parents were wrong. So I'm like, hey, you remember that thing you said I was going to do? I never did it. So you were wrong. But having like, you know, road signs to like direct the course and like steer you in the right direction. And it's like, this could happen. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe it won't happen. But even just having somewhere in there the ability to pull from that later in life, you never know when you're going to need that tool out of your shed, kind of thing. That's what I like, what I'm hearing you say anyway. It's like you're giving them all this information and they can choose to implement it or not. And when they do implement it, their parents are like, oh wow, look at all these things that are happening. But it's almost like it's a very one-way relationship, at least for the teen connection. That is.
Yeah, and it is. And I think another piece that I feel like comes up a lot with the teen. So most of the teens that I work with are like 12 to 15-year-old girls. And it's a challenging time. But a lot of them don't feel a really strong connection with their friends. Like they have friends, but there's so many like I mean, I know that was a very challenging time for me in friendships. Like, a lot of them don't feel like they can really be truthful and honest and share everything with their friends. And they also typically don't want to do that with their moms at this phase of life because of all the reasons, you know? And so, a lot of times, like, that's the role that I am. I'm the role of the person who listens to, like, how they're really feeling about things and can support them in like how to navigate this friendship or and so like that's another piece is just having someone to be able to process what's going on for them socially and even just to express like I don't feel like I can tell my friends things because of X, Y, and Z. Like that's an important piece, and sometimes they don't teens don't want to share that with their moms because their moms will be like, well, are they not a supportive friend? Blah, 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 blah. But sometimes like I think the piece of advice I would give to all parents, myself included, is how can you strengthen your ability to just listen and be open to what your child or your teen is saying without trying to fix it, giving an opinion or advice.
That is exactly what I think most parents and any relationship needs to hear. Like, especially like a spousal relationship too. Like, you always want to make it better. Sometimes you just need a sounding board. And the other thing I think is really important to highlight is those preteen and early teen girl relationships are some of the most difficult relationships of your lifetime. It's You just don't know who's going to talk about you, what the gossip's going to be, if someone's going to stab you in the back, or Lord only knows. And it's like, so, socially, it can be just so mortifying. And it's not surprising. It was hard before. I remember vividly. It was so hard before as a teen. I can't imagine now with like all the social media and all of those like extra things to layer on how, you know, anxiety ridden some kids can be these days. And I mean, again, I don't have a teenager yet, but I could just imagine you're already so self-conscious, you're going through puberty, you're having all these changes, your hormones are out of control, and now you have a one more thing to worry about. It's just that's a lot. That's a lot.
The the friendships with girls and the meanness that takes place, and I participated in it myself at that age a lot, is it can be like it can affect your ability to have friendships for the rest of your life if you allow it to. And so that's another important thing, is like helping with perspective taking for teens, because it can feel, and I remember it so vividly, like your world is literally ending. And I think it's important as a parent to remember that you feel the pain of like a social rejection, especially when you're a teenager, happens in the same place as physical pain in your brain. And so, like, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but when my friends in seventh and eighth grade turned on me, or when my like boyfriend, who I thought we were going to get married as a freshman in high school, dumped me, like, it was heartbreaking and painful on so many levels. And like, as a parent, it can be really hard to understand that, because you're like, you have like the rest of your life. These people, I mean, there's some crazy statistic that like you're only the chances of you being friends your senior year with the friends that you're friends with your freshman year are like 90% you're going to have different friends. So there's all these things that as parents we're like, oh, like it's going to be fine. Like you're going to make new friends, but it feels like you physically got hurt. And so really understanding, and also it's so hard. So understanding that like this is a pain that they're feeling viscerally and physically in their body. And also, even if you've had the same experience and you're saying like, I get it, I had this experience too, they also don't want to hear that. So they want you to just be like open and listening, and not comparing them to you, and not telling them it's going to be okay, but just being there in their pain with them, and loving them and connecting with them and being present with them and supporting them.
One simple thing parents can adjust themselves, something that you've seen or you recommend regularly to your clients. What is one thing parents could do today to have better interactions with their teenagers?
I mean, I think it comes back to really focusing on yourself and getting really clear and working on healing your own trauma or wounds or whatever it is that you have, so that you can show up with clean energy. I think so much of the time, especially in this like 13, 12 to 15-year-old girl time, the girls are pushing away and the moms are like becoming more like, let me control this, let me like take care of you. Like I'm feeling like their energy is needy a lot, because they've had this like super strong bond, and now they're seeing like, I mean, some parents, I think especially in this age group of girls, it can feel like a loss of a relationship to the parent. And I think the teens are like, yo, I'm still here, but I am changing, and I want you to like take my hand and walk with me, and not try to control me. So like accept me and give me space, and that's how we will like get through this challenging time.
Oh, I really like that. Oh, I love that a lot. That's really good. Like walk beside me, like not don't try to drag me. I love that. Okay. This is something I was just yeah. Yeah, no, that's really good. You can't force your kid in one direction or another. Like you can see that with toddlers. So of course it's going to be the same as they get older. Um, what insight would you have for in engaging in difficult subjects or controversies? Like there's so many things happening in our culture today, be it vaccine mandates or overturning Roe versus Wade, or just simply even just like talking to your kids about like sex. Like that makes parents, I feel, very uncomfortable, at least some parents. Do you have any like tips of talking about these complex issues for parents who might feel apprehensive about broaching those topics?
Yeah, I think it's important to I feel like a broken record a little bit, but look before you have the hard conversations, look at yourself and see like why is this feeling hard and uncomfortable for me? Was this something that like my parents talked to me about? Was this something that I have shame about? Um and so that you can like understand yourself, because I think with communication it starts with like understanding ourselves first and then being able to come to a conversation, whether that be with our child or our spouse or our best friend, um clear on like who we are and what we feel and what we need. And so I think that's really important. I think it's always okay if your child asks you a question about something that you're not ready to talk about because you haven't like done the research, or you don't know where you stand, or you don't know how you want to talk about it with them. It's always okay to say like, "Hey, this is a really important issue," or, you know, if say like obviously we're in Roe v. Wade time right now. This is a really important issue. I really am like so glad that you asked me about it, and I'm still learning about it, or I need to like get really clear on some things first, and I would love to like circle back to this conversation tomorrow. So that you can come from a place of knowing.
I think that's another thing we don't do. Yes, I love that. I think that's my kid asks me all the time questions, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Let me get back to you.
And like you have a little kid, and I, you know, my kids are younger too, so I understand. They kind of think of us as like all-knowing gods and goddesses right now, right? Kings and queens, whatever you want to say. Like sometimes my kids are like, "Wait, you don't know?" I'm like, "No, I don't know so many things." Like, let's normalize like not knowing and being human.
Right? I'm not a doctor and I'm not a biologist. I don't understand microbes. Sorry, 4-year-old.
But it's also really interesting. This point is really interesting because when adolescence hits, that like 12, 10, 11, 12, that's when our kids start to see that we don't know everything. And so that's when that pushback really begins of like, "Wait, mom, you don't know. Like you don't know." And so that's a really interesting like time of, okay, they've always thought of you as the one who knows, and now they're questioning everything. So like that, just knowing that that's what's happening and being like, "Okay, I see what's happening. They're going to start questioning everything now. They've looked at me as like the person who knows everything. Now they're questioning everything." Like it helps to understand why they're doing that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like you should push back. I mean, I always questioned authority, even if it was silently. How can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram at Elise Knox Connection Coach, and then my website is eliseknox.com, and everything is there on both places.
Is there anything we didn't discuss that you think is super important or hyper relevant, especially for teens today?
I think just kind of that like walking with them and loving them and connecting that with them and being present with them is so important, because they just want to be seen for who they are right now and accepted for who they are right now.
I love that. And don't we all just want that too? Don't we just want to be loved for who we are? Right? Simple.
Yes. Yes, simple. I think it's so funny. I just read something on Instagram this morning that was like all the parenting like techniques and tips and books. It's like just love and connect with your kid.
That's no, I love that. And that is an excellent way for our conversation to end. Thank you so much, Elise, for your time and sharing your expertise on connections and communicating with your teens. This is Elise Knox, health coach. We'll have all of her links and stuff in our bio and all the details so you can find her. I'm the mom who knows nada. My name is Brianna. This is the Mama Knows Nada podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, have fun learning all the things you didn't know you needed to know.